Full-blown computers going to council.
Okay, guys. As you might notice, I hope you noticed, I'm not Gene. If you didn't notice that, I may have some things to deal with. But today, you guys have Dr. Larry Beard and Dr. Cynthia Connor coming to speak to you, and they've got some really cool sort of outside-the-box type thinking and do-it-yourself sort of approaches that every time I see them do it, I continue to want to start my own projects. It's been really inspiring, and I hope you'll give them your attention. I'll let them do their own introductions as far as video material. But sit back, eat, and enjoy, and learn.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming. Dr. Beard and I are from the College of Education, and before we get started, I heard there's some people here from accounting. Is that right? Okay, accounting, nursing. Okay, what are some of the other areas? Just so we kind of... Biology, science, art, okay. English,
CIS.
okay. English, all right, wonderful. Well, what we're going to talk to you today about is really, if there were one key word, it would be accessibility. How many of you, by the way, I'm looking on the table, have iPads? Okay, and you pretty much use them on an everyday basis, and you really don't think about the fact that you're using this device to do just about everything now, and you physically don't think about what you're doing, you just do it. But because Dr. Beard and I, for a number of years, taught children and young adults with physical and intellectual disabilities for whom that was not always an option. They did not have the physical capability to, back then, use a mouse, because about 20 years ago, the only people, that needed a touchscreen were those children who couldn't use a mouse. No one was using a touchscreen. We all had the mouse, and now everyone's using a touchscreen. So that line between what makes something for someone with a disability and something just everyone uses, that has really faded and gone down a lot. And so now a lot of the things that we used to consider just for people, individuals, adults, children with disabilities, now everyone uses. And that's great, because there's nothing worse when you are a child or adolescent as looking different. And if you're walking around with your iPad, that maybe you access it a little bit differently, but it's still an iPad, and all your peers have iPads, you're not that different from anyone else. So if you want to just go to the first slide there, we just talk about, we saw this in action, and we felt like that it would be very important for our teacher candidates to have the opportunity to see what could be done with an iPad to make it more accessible, and to take that out into the schools where they are doing their practicum and internships. Now granted, there are some school systems where they have the one-on-one initiative, and a lot of the students have iPads. And if you're really lucky, some of the students with disabilities, especially significant disabilities, have iPads, but not all. So we thought, okay, would there be a way that we could provide them loaner iPads, or in this case mini iPads, and the equipment that they needed to make it more accessible, which we'll talk about in a minute, to go out into the schools with that equipment, check it out, and take it out. And so we applied for the Real Teaching Grant last fall, and we were fortunate enough to get the funds to be able to do that. So with our funds, we purchased 4 mini iPads, and the reason we did mini iPads is we could either have 2 big ones or 4 little ones. We wanted more. So we purchased 4 mini iPads, and some of the equipment that we'll show you in a minute that makes the iPad, certainly you can use it with any child, and a lot of times these teacher candidates are going into inclusive classrooms, but we also have the equipment to make it more accessible by use of the switch, which we'll explain on that. So for those students who are not able to access the iPad directly by touching, what are you going to do? And by the way, we're talking about students with disabilities, but any one of us could walk out this door, could have some kind of accident where we have a spinal cord injury, or traumatic brain injury, and we could lose our physical ability to access an iPad. So this is not just about special ed. This is about accessibility and universal design for all. Because more and more we're looking to see how can we create spaces, how can we create opportunities for everyone that those who have physical limitations can utilize, but it also makes it easier for those who don't, and they want to use it that way. So keep that in mind, that this is not just about special ed, this is about accessibility. So for those students who are not able to access the iPad directly, what are we going to do? So with this project, we purchased our mini iPads, and then we purchased a set of switches, and a switch can be any device, which we'll show you in a minute, but the type of switches we purchased were the little push-button switches. This is a switch, and when you touch it, you can make something happen depending on what it's set up to. Now, again, the reason we got the little ones instead of bigger ones is because more for our money. When you have $2,000, you want to make it stretch as far as it could go, and we spent, I guess, to about the last penny, right?
Pretty much. I think it was in at the left.
Right. So, because we also utilized some of our funds, we did a lot of searching. How many of you have downloaded free apps on your iPad? Okay. How many of you have spent money for apps? Okay. Sometimes you gotta spend a little bit of money, and we did utilize some of our funds, not a lot, but some for purchasing some apps, but we also utilized a lot of free apps. What we were looking for are those apps that could be switch accessible. And what's the next slide? So with our funds, we were able to purchase our equipment, train our students on our AT day, and we'll have some information about that, have our students take what they learned on our assistive technology day and show off to, we always have a showcase every semester, the College of Education, where those students who are in the elementary program and those students in the special ed program set up in a room and show off projects that they've made throughout their time in the semester. So our students, after the AT day, they were showing off to the other students. We also taught them, if you don't want to spend, and by the way, one of these runs between $30 to $75, depending on size. Is there a way that you can build it yourself? And we found a way, and we trained them how to do it. And then we gave them the opportunity to take this out into the actual schools. In fact, that's why I only have 2 of our mini iPads here, because 2 of them right now, we have some students out in practicum today, and they're actually utilizing it out in the classrooms right now. We have done several presentations from CORE here at JSU to New Orleans, to next spring I will be going to St. Louis to the Council for Exceptional Children National Conference. We presented to our department. We presented, where else? Professional Development Day for our College of Education.
Technology.
Oh, the Birmingham Technology Fair, our conference down in Birmingham, which I highly recommend that conference. You will find all kinds of wonderful things there. And so we have some publications that have come from a result of this, and we're looking to do more. And then the last thing we've done is we've actually, those undergrads that participated in AT Day and became comfortable with this, they were actually able to train some of our graduate students who only come on campus every couple of times a semester. And we wanted to take advantage of having their live bodies here, because most of our courses, as you know, are online. But while they were here, we wanted to demonstrate to them like we're going to you today. But we decided we just let our undergrads handle it and do today. So a lot of good things have happened from this grant. So the first thing we did on the AT Day was we shared with our students, by then we had purchased our mini iPads, and we actually, the first 3 we purchased, we had one of these cases, which again, nice case, not not real expensive. We were trying to stretch our budget. And then I think when we were here on AT Day, someone, was it Gina Christopher, or someone shared with us this type of case. So when we realized we had some funds left and we wanted to spend every penny, so we purchased another mini iPad and this type of case, which is a little bit more durable. This is the one that when the students want to check out a mini iPad, they go for this one first thing. And on these, we have downloaded, when we download on one, because it's all part of the same account, when we download an app on one, it goes to all four. So the apps are downloaded on our 4 mini iPads, the ones we purchased as well as the freebies, because there were some really appropriate freebies, which I'll show you in a minute. And our students also, when they take these out, if there is a free app that they want to utilize in the classroom, because one of the things that we say is we give you some examples, but every classroom, every child is different. And so what might be great for one classroom or one child, might not really be appropriate for another. So they are, they're in that app world much more than we are. They know what's out there. They know how to search for apps and pull up apps that are appropriate for just about everything. So they go out in the classroom, and there are a few apps that they have downloaded when they use these out in the classroom, depending on what the subject matter was. But here, 2 of our students are examining the iPad cases, so we pass them around. And then the next thing we did is we showed them how can you make this iPad accessible. So the device that we purchased is called a switch interface. Now, there are some that do plug into the iPads, but we wanted the Bluetooth wireless ones for a number of reasons. For instance, sometimes you may want to have more than one child working on an iPad, and they can't all be around it, so you may want to have the opportunity for them to utilize it from a distance. So I'm going to give you an example of just a basic learning program that is switch accessible and how this works. So give me just a minute. So one of the things we did was we looked at free learning apps when we were first starting out before we had any money, and then when we did had some funds. There were a few apps that did cover some basic learning skills in the areas of language arts and science and mathematics. They were from the UK, but they had what we needed, so we did purchase them. And these, by what I mean by that is they were switch accessible apps. There are tons of apps out there, but not all of them were switch accessible. And they weren't that expensive. We bundled. We got three for one price, so it was a good. So just there were different categories, and I think I was doing something about eyes here. Oh, sorry. So the first.
What body do we use?
So you'll notice the nice British accent, but one of the first things I have to do is I have to tell it that I want to make this switch accessible. So I enable the switch, and I'm only going to use one switch. Some of them you can use 2. When you use 2, one switch is to move your answers and one is to select. When you use one, you have what we call scanning, which I'll demonstrate in a minute.
Which part of our body do we use to see?
So obviously, if this were just a regular program, a student would touch on the touch screen to make a selection. But to make it switch adaptable, which are we paired? We have to pair this up, and by Bluetooth. And sometimes our Bluetooth works great, and sometimes it kicks us off, and we have to go back again until we want to connect. Yes, I know it. And each of our switch interfaces is a different serial number, so every time you switch it, we try to keep the same switch interface with the same iPad because you do have to reconnect when you have a new switch interface. And I have to turn it off. Do you want to go ahead and talk about, I think the next one is Dr. Beard at our AT workshop. One of the things we trained students is another way that you can use these switches is to create battery interrupters.
Yeah,
And,
you're right.
and if you'd like to do that, I'm going to see if I can get this paired up.
Okay, one of the things that we have to worry about with particularly some of our students is the idea that if they push the button, something happens. A lot of our students don't understand the cause and effect stuff. So what we were doing was we were finding some interesting toys. We call them toys because we're all big kids, right? And this little, our little Arctic wolf over here, who not only walks and barks and makes noises, and he's a lot of fun, but this is the way you turn him on and off. And some of our kids literally can't turn him on and off, and if we leave him on all the time, as fun as he is, he's annoying. So what we were trying to do was show a way where we can get the student to get the idea that if they push a switch, something's going to happen to this guy. And we have these little $75 switches, but what we did with this when we built it, we made a thing called a battery interrupter. So if you've got a toy that runs on a battery, we can interrupt the current and make it go through a switch. So this is a switch. It kind of looks like a push light. That's because it used to be. We get these at the Dollar Tree because we're cheap. But we've turned this into a switch that we can, I think I've got him turned on. And if you really want to be annoying, oh, I killed him. See, if you really want to be annoying, he makes noise. And he falls over a lot. Connor broke his leg. But, you know, I can also turn him off when I get tired of him. So I don't have to turn him over, find the on-off switch. We built this interrupter for probably $1.25.
And they cost about $10 per shot from the catalogs. And one of the things that we have this just to demonstrate, there are all kinds, if you think about science lessons, Arctic animals and all, especially in working with younger children who, you know, they love hands-on activities. Well, if you've got a child that physically, if you're talking about, say, an Arctic owl, and they can take the puppet and they can put it on their hands and they can make it fly and do all the things. But if you have a child that can't do that, how can they interact with a lesson on Arctic animals where you actually have some hands-on activity, and that's exactly how they can. So this just gives you, and it doesn't have to be toys. Well, we do call them toys, because we love to have fun. It could be anything. For adults, I mean, think how many things we utilize ourselves, where it's just one touch. When's the last time you got up out of your chair to go change the TV channel? Or turn the TV off and on? Only when you couldn't find this, right? I mean, I've lost this a couple of times, but I guess the point is, yes?
Will this interrupter work with cell phones?
I don't think so. I don't think it, right now, the best kind of batteries it works with are AA, AAA, or C and Ds. I don't think it would. I know one thing we found a number of years ago, I used to utilize it on cassette players. Where I had stories on tape, and I would let my kids kind of, quote, read the story by touching the switch and making it go. And that was wonderful. But when we came out, you know, with CD players, the problem is every time they would touch the switch to pause it or do whatever, the CD would start back over. So there are certain things that it's not going to be perfect for. But it does allow that opportunity to have the hands-on interaction, just like anyone likes to do. Anyone likes to be a part. And there's nothing more frustrating than seeing someone else be able to do something and you can't. So whether it's playing with toys or turning on a TV, you know. So, I've got the
Okay.
battery interrupter, but while I've got this paired up, could I just demonstrate real quick? Because this utilizes the switch too. And hopefully this will work this time. And I do have it on switch sensible.
Which part of our body do we use to see? Eyes.
Okay, so what this is going to do is going to scan. Scanning is when it moves from one to the other to the other. Kind of like probably some of you played video games that you do that.
Eyes.
And when it is on the correct one and the student pushes the switch to make the choice, there you go, you get reward. And again, this reward, this is a basic learning app for probably I'd say kindergarten, maybe first grade. But the thing is, if we can do this for kindergarten and first grade learning, why can't it be done for higher level learning? Because again, we're not just talking about those students who are on the lower levels cognitively. Any student, any adolescent, any college student could go from being very active, physically active, to because of an injury, have only the capability of maybe
Eyeball.
moving their hand. And by the way, you're not limited to your hand. You can put it on your head. Anything you can purposely move, you can hook a switch up to. I've seen students move their wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs. One switch was for stop and go, one switch was for turning and going. So, where is it?
Eyebrow.
And it gives you the vocal, and oh, I didn't get it right, so now I've got to start again.
Eyebrow.
And you, by the way, you can change the timing
Eyelashes.
on how long it takes to
Pupil.
scan. I have it on 5 seconds. You could have it on 1 second or even longer. And for some people, they may need that extra time. So I'm sorry, I just want to show that Polly was
Fine.
actually working.
Eyelashes.
Oh, and I have a score. I need to work on my eye skills, but anyway, this is just a sample. So by taking a switch, you can make things work, you can access an iPad, and so like Dr. Beard said though, when you go to the catalog and you look at the battery interrupters and you look at the switches, you're seeing money, money, money. And there are ways that you can do it yourself. So I'm going to let Dr. Beard take over. Now,
Okay, what we're going to play with now, let me show you guys how to build one of these things. They're not nearly as complicated as they look. You just need some some toys. You can use electrical tape. It's not terribly permanent. Generally what we want you to do is solder it. This is a portable electric solder. It runs on batteries. If you get the opportunity, don't buy one of these. You'll get about 20 solders out of it, and it takes 4 batteries. Electricians call them battery eaters, and they will go through your batteries. I've got one that I think was my granddad's that we use when we do this at school. Plugs in, works great. It's probably 50 years old at least. But a lot of this stuff we got, you know, everybody's got a garage that's just full of junk. Women call it junk, you know, we call it collectibles. This was some of Connor's wire from back when she was a hippie and had wire room speakers for the stereo. I know none of y'all ever remember doing that. But we had speakers in every room in our house. And this was just setting up on a shelf. See what else we get. If you get, well, when you get a wire stripper, get a good one. Because I got one of the cheap Dollar Tree ones, and it's easier to bite the wire and strip the insulation off than it is to use one of those. And I never could get it off with a pocket knife. I always managed to leave little nicks in my thumbs. These are great. I'm going to show you how it works in a second. What else do we need? Yeah, this, everybody's got a general all-purpose tool, right? I mean, everybody's got it. Christmas at the Beard House, it always involves something with blades on it. Some of them are a lot bigger than this. But what this is my wire splitter. You know, it's not really a knife, it's a wire splitter, and I'll show you how it works in a second. You've got to have some kind of conductor. We found this on Amazon. It's just copper sheeting. It's a little thin for our purposes, but you know, we can live with that. You can get stuff that's already got the insulation between it. It's a little more. And you can tell by looking at it, it's really hard to cut. So if you're trying to make one of these little splitters, it's not easy to do. Aluminum will work. Aluminum's cheaper than copper. So, here's the next step. Okay, yeah, that was it. We use this. This is easy to cut. Pair of scissors. Guess where I got these? I get everything at the Dollar Tree that I can. So I got me a $1 pair of scissors here. I don't cut this. It cuts the copper a whole lot easier. But when you make the two ends, here's one. You have to have an insulator between the two sheets of metal. Okay. And insulators are really easy. It's not going to come out. This was the cardboard box that the batteries came in. I just cut a section, slid it in there, works fine. I tried rubber cement. I got a rubber cement story I'll tell you one of these days. The bottle opened up in my briefcase. And the nice thing about rubber cement is you can rub it and it'll come right off. That's where I've got these calluses on my thumb. But anyway, so, see, here comes the fun part. Get your wire, you can make this as long as you want. If you've got a kid that the only thing he can do is tap his foot, you can build a switch, slide it under that foot and let him tap. But the wire is going to have to be longer than if he can use his hand. And, you know, then you just cut it. See, my switch is going to be that long, right? Now, since these are new tables, I'm going to take my wire splitter, that really isn't a knife, you stick it between the two cables, and this works better when you go to the bottom of your bifocals. And voila, I've got a split wire. And that's a whole lot easier than taking out your pocket knife and cutting your thumb again. So, how do I strip these? You get your wire strippers that also still have a little rubber cement in there, so it kind of sticks. That stuff gets everywhere. See, that's all it is to it. See, I told you it'd stick. And now I've got my wire stripped. Ooh, I think it's stripped in the next one. Okay, go on to the next one. Now you can use solder, you can use anything that you can make sure that it stays in contact. I cut my piece of metal and didn't do anything with it. Oh, this was one I tried to glue together with rubber cement for the insulation. It was a better idea than it actually worked, but I have a lot of ideas that don't work. The story of my life.
So yeah, just
But, you know, that's half the fun, right? And then you just stick one on this side, one on this side. You can solder this. You can use, where's my electrical tape? You can use electrical tape to tape them. This also has rubber cement. I tell you what, guys, that stuff gets into everything. And somewhere on here there's an end. Our undergraduates do this a whole lot better than I do. What did I do with everything? Ever have one of those days? easy way. Just grab the electrical tape, you've got the two ends on it. Make sure the copper wires don't touch, because that shorts out the whole thing. I'm going to take this, I'm going to slide it in. That's what this battery interrupter looks like. Actually looks like that. Okay. Oh, this one actually soldered. One of the nice things about solder that they don't tell you is they get really, really, really hot. So make sure you don't try to hold the piece of metal down while you're soldering it. It will get your attention. It's pretty quick, actually. Now, if you want to make one that you can plug into this interface, okay, they make these connectors. We get them from Radio Shack. They're in the phone section. These are just little phone plugs. That one will plug into this one. Okay. Or it'll plug into back here where we've got these plugged in. And then if you hook your switch to the other end, that's what we did with this one. Then I can use this as a switch instead of this switch. That was what, $1.25? This one was about 75 and 9 cents. By the way, they found out if you could use it with special ed, they added one to everything. So I had to warm you in advance. So let's see, we got a plug. And this one, this is a lot of fun. This is a card shuffler. We usually bring it, but it gives us too much trouble. But when you plug this lead in, I usually use the positive side of the battery. Okay, that's the side that, oh my bad, so that's this side. It's the side with the little knob on it. It just works better that way. And these are some of our, they're now Block 3 students. Block 2 students. I know they're Block something. Some are Block 8 students. Nick and Dylan were playing with, these were the two guys we couldn't run out. They had such fun playing with this. You know, class is over and they're not moving. So that was them showing you how you can do a battery interrupted. We had Christmas lights. Those may have been the dragonflies.
Bats or something.
Yeah, it depends on the holiday. Or whatever we're trying to do. We've got a bunch of leaves we do when they talk about science projects. You know, why is a leaf green? You punch it, you got these green leaves.
Which the lights that are the dragonflies and leaves and flowers, so if you're doing, you know, a science lesson with different living things, again, some child who can't physically pick up a leaf or pick up but they can make the light come on, it allows them to be engaged and to act. And we all know, you know, some things we know, students learn so much more when they are engaged in learning. So, Dollar Tree, great source. We've got boxes of different kinds of lights for different lessons. And by the way, when we do our training with our undergrads, I try and find some general ed, Alabama College Career Standards that would go along with the lesson that you could utilize this with. I believe the Arctic Animals, there's a science standard about environment and living things. And then we have, again, the science with the living things with non-flowering and flowering leaves, flowers. So we always try and see how they can take what they are going to be required to teach out there and utilize this with them. And we were demonstrating that day with this. And yeah, there's the science standard right there.
And we just take a day, and Connor and I combine our classes. We spend all day playing with this stuff. We go over to DSS, work with Katie Newgang. She walks our kids through their lab. She shows them all the stuff that our kids use on campus. It's really a neat afternoon. I told somebody we did that and they want us to open it up to the community.
Right. And you know, I don't know if you found this. I don't know how many of you have your students actually do something hands-on. But there's a whole generation growing up that and don't get me wrong, I love the technology, but making things themselves out of, scrap or whatever, they're kind of not getting as many opportunities. So here, back when we were talking about our Block 2 students, I mean, you would think they had won the lottery. They were so excited. I mean, that's Nick, he's on our football team. And you would think he had just, gotten the football and made a touchdown because he made that himself and he made it work. We told him what to do, they did it. And at first it didn't work. We had to try and figure out why. And when something doesn't work, sometimes you learn just as much as when it does because you have to figure out what's wrong. And I think that they just, a lot of times, they don't get as much hands-on as they used to years ago as we did. And so it really is exciting for them to experience that. Oops, sorry.
I taught a class in Minnesota, in a plus class. And part of it was they had kits, computer kits, and they were about the size of a bread box, if anybody remembers what a bread box is. And they put it together, like you say, and they worked, they had troubleshoot, and they put it together, and each part that they put in, then we would go over that part, and I'll tell you, they loved it. They loved it. I wish we could do more of that here.
I don't know if an app is Switch accessible.
It says it on there.
When
And I have something I'm going to show you in a minute you're going to be very interested in because we have a solution if it's not Switch accessible, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. So we did our AT Day, and then in the end of the spring when we did our showcase, we have all these, we opened it up, by the way, to the whole campus. We want some of those freshmen and sophomores that think they might be interested in education or just interested in finding out what else goes on in this campus. How many of us get in our buildings and we don't really go anywhere else and find out what's going on campus? By the way, who's in the art